Let's try out Erenshor. This is a single-player MMO, a game that on a foundational level has the soul of a classic MMO, combining all of the vibes, aesthetics, RPG mechanics, and gameplay elements that you would expect from an MMORPG, such as World of Warcraft or RuneScape. But as a single-player game, you explore through a massive open world, completing quests, collecting items, finding secrets, going through raids, but all by yourself, but surrounded by other simulated players. This is such an interesting concept on a foundational level that I really want to dive into, but let's just get started with the game itself. My adventures began as most games do with the title screen. With this being inspired by MMOs, it has many different MMO mechanics in it, but since it is a single player game, it is pretty easy to allow the opportunity for players to customize the general game's experience in many ways, including sliders for experience modifiers, global run speed, NPC health modifiers, NPC damage modifiers, rare drop rate modifiers, respawn time links, and how many simulated players will be running around the world, with additional checkboxes to enable minimap, quest markers, target level, experience penalty on deaths, the ability for GMs to jail the player, and whether or not weak mobs will run away. This allows a ton of opportunities for players to customize the game exactly how they want, but if all of the options are too overwhelming for you, you can just select a preset. For me, I went with pretty much the standard default, but enabled some quality of life options that I personally enjoy, with enabling a minimap, quest markers, and showing the target's level. From there is then a few opportunities for character customization, alongside the ability to select one of 6 classes, and then to add points to different proficiencies. I went with a pretty standard option for what I think I would enjoy, but there are a ton of options to create new characters, plus apparently a way to unlock more through playing the game. Afterwards, there's then the option to select a starting experience. The game provides a decently lengthy tutorial area that eases you into the game, teaches you some stuff, and lets you get an early start. But there's another option for players who understand the game to, from what I assume, to basically just jump straight into the game with all the content and progression systems available. For me, since I just started, I decided to go with the beginner option. And it is indeed pretty cool. We start at a port that we were apparently redirected to on our way to a new life on Erenshor. The general story is that we basically need to explore the island and find a way to continue towards Erenshor. You get some opportunities to learn basic mechanics, and then you get thrown into the open world opportunities available in the area. With the game acting as an MMO, it can definitely feel pretty complex. I'm a pretty casual player in games, but I have played MMOs for a long time, so I didn't have too many issues just picking up the game naturally. And of course, as I continue to play, I will learn the game more and become even more comfortable. But if you're someone who isn't super used to MMOs, you may struggle a bit. Fortunately, there are all the options we talked about before, plus we don't have other players running around the road that you need to be stressed out about with meeting their expectations. Plus, so far, the game has done a very good job at explaining different systems, and for anything that I may be struggling with, the game has a wiki that you can even access through a button in-game that will open it in your preferred browser. As I've begun exploring a tiny bit, I am definitely just throwing myself against the world. I love exploring and learning about systems relatively naturally, and that is obviously supported within this game. As I explored, I came across the entrance to a bandit cave, and the game began to teach me a new mechanic. There are all of the simulated players around the world which are doing their own thing and talking and chat and whatnot, but they are actually pretty complex. One thing you can do with them is chat with them and chat back, but you can even invite them to your party. You can get up to 4 allies to have a party of 5, and then you can run around the world questing together. In the context of the bandit cave, it was definitely a bit of a challenging area, with bandits that were just slightly higher level than me. But with a full group, we were able to come in here together and work together to fight through the bandit cave to the end and fight the final boss in the end. From a first experience standpoint, this was just a really cool system, and it seems like there are a lot of built-in opportunities to control and navigate the group in different ways, kind of similar to the hero system in the original Guild Wars for anyone who is familiar with that game. But it was also nice to be able to just quickly gather a group of nearby adventurers together and to dive into a unique area, and I just know that this bandit cave is one of many places like this, which would be great to have some help going through. Afterwards, I continued exploring the world and doing random things. I think I got a pretty good handle on the basic gameplay elements, and also scoped out the entirety of the starter island and have a pretty good understanding of everything going on here. There's definitely a decent amount of stuff going on despite how small the area is. But one thing in particular that I found which is interesting is the first dungeon in the game. I was definitely curious on how this would play out in comparison to dungeons I am familiar with in other MMOs, so I took a group in and gave it a try. And it didn't go super well. It wasn't horrible, but I was definitely very weak, and I think I needed to do a tiny bit more preparation before starting. So I went back out into the world and did a bit more questing, leveled up a tiny bit, tried to get more armor, and tried to learn more skills, while also figuring out how party compositions work in this game. Returning after a little bit of time, I was definitely in a much better spot, and it was significantly easier to progress through this area. It feels like a pretty traditional dungeon from older MMOs. There are some winding hallways that lead to different areas filled with a lot of trash, and some mobs that have a chance to drop a variety of items. There aren't too many mechanics that you would see in modern MMOs, but definitely some mechanics in the older sense, like getting out of the fire and interrupting enemy attacks. It was definitely a pretty fun experience, but this dungeon is interesting in the sense that you get parts of a key, but then you have to go out into the open world and kill the big Plaxictheris boss, which I struggled to kill before this point, and still struggled at this point. So I went back around Stowaway's Step and did a little bit more stuff to gain some more power, and tried again with much more success. I was then able to make the key, open the door, and continue progressing through the dungeon and easily defeating the final boss. At this point, I've definitely spent a decent amount of time on the starting isle, and I'm now just wrapping up most of the quests that are available while learning a lot about the game. I definitely went a bit slower than most people would through this area, but I feel like I got a good starting handle on the game, and I am pretty well equipped for my current level. After finishing up a few more quests, I was finally able to head towards the mainland and begin my adventures here. Immediately, I feel a little overwhelmed because so much is available all at once now. But for me, I think doing some simple progression, just like I have been, as I continue through the game is the best plan. However, I have to take a moment to spend a little bit of time running around the world and exploring, just to look at stuff and to take in the sights, not necessarily to do anything in particular to progress. One big thing I was interested in was going to Port Azure. This seems like a pretty important location, serving as one of the biggest cities in the game, if not the biggest. You also get an achievement for arriving here, but there's definitely a lot of stuff, and the areas around here are slightly higher level than I currently am, so I decided it's time to continue some more simple progression. When it comes to what I feel like is the general progression, it is pretty straightforward. The majority of the game is just killing enemies while progressing through areas and getting some loot to become more powerful. There are more systems that are generally attached to these ideas, but the bulk of your time spent playing the game will definitely just be killing enemies and clearing areas over and over, like the dungeons. I am somebody who's definitely a completionist when it comes to games, but this specific game is hitting a little bit different for me, where I don't feel the need to 100% complete every little thing that is available. I just don't have the desire for it, and I'm mostly just enjoying the game for the sake of completing achievements, and at its current moment, just leveling up and gearing up. There are of course the Steam achievements, which I will be going for, which are basically the biggest sense of completion in the game outside of reaching max level and optimizing your character. Though the achievements are something I will slowly but surely work on as I progress through the game. After a bit of adventuring, I think it is time to tackle the second dungeon in the game, known as the Bone Pits. This is a bit of a higher level dungeon compared to the Island Tomb, but is comparatively a bit easier. Going into this, I am definitely stronger at this level than I was at the level I started the Island Tomb. Additionally, I think I'm getting a much better handle on the game at this point, which just made progressing through the entire dungeon much easier. One interesting thing about dungeons in this game is that they are definitely inspired by some older dungeons and older MMOs, meaning that while they are separated from the open world zones, they are still areas you can find other players in. You can go in with a group of 5 yourself, but there are often other groups in here as well, which you can combine forces with, making everything significantly easier, which is an idea I'm not personally used to, and is definitely interesting. In some ways it trivializes everything, but in some ways it provides a unique sense of adventure and cooperation. When it comes to the Bone Pits specifically, it is pretty similar in many ideas to the Island Tomb, but I found the last boss, an apparition of Sivakaya, I hope I'm pronouncing all these fantasy names correctly, a very interesting looking boss, and it seems like there's a lot of lore here that I will hopefully learn more about as I continue progressing through the game. Which after the dungeon, it is time to return to some more open world exploring, completing quests, killing monsters, and really I could just run the dungeons over and over again. A big thing for me is learning how all the different parts of the world are connected together. As I'm exploring, I'm definitely looking for the different entrances to other maps and to the different dungeons so I can have a better sense of the world and a better sense of direction as I'm navigating through the world. If I were to make a single change to the game so far, it would be to add an option to have more detailed zone maps. Obviously, that is not something that was always common back in the day, and it's definitely something we see in more modern MMOs, but being able to see the entire zone and what you have explored at a single time, and also be able to click on each zone on the world map would be great for me at least. It can easily be one of the toggles in the admin menu where you could toggle this option on and off, depending on what you want your experience to be. Now I will say what I exactly said is actually available through a mod. Bush Erenshor actually has a ton of mods, and it is not something I have experimented with just yet, but maybe something I take a look at in the future. But we also see with some older mods, their functionality has been added to the game, and maybe we will see something like this in the future. After some more random adventuring and leveling, I wanted to try out the next dungeon in the game, Old Krakengard, a really cool looking fort that is pretty extravagant on the inside. There's a basic opening area, but then the dungeon really just spreads off into 3 directions, each pretty far away from the center. Within each direction is a boss that will drop a key that allows you to enter the next section. So basically, as you complete each 1/3 of the dungeon, you unlock a checkpoint, all the way to the final boss, who you can kill, which does grant an achievement, which I believe is true for each dungeon in the game. After clearing through here, it's back to running around the open world, doing random things, and rerunning this dungeon again for more gear and more experience. And that is, once again, what seems to be the general content loop of the game. For me, I find it pretty enjoyable, and many others do as well, but for many others, it can be less of an enjoyable experience. It just depends on what you like. Fortunately for you, this game does have a demo where you can play through everything available in the Stowaway Step starting area to try out the game yourself and see if you like it and would want to play a lot of it. And truly, I do recommend this game. I've had a ton of fun just playing through it up to this point, and moving forward, I am sure I will continue playing it as well. It also seems to still be getting frequent updates, which makes sense because it is still in early access with a hopeful release in 2027. I am definitely interested to see if there are going to be something akin to expansions like we see in other MMOs once the game is fully released. Up to this point, I basically talked about every big thing I wanted to talk about in relation to Erenshor. In short, the game is fun, and I definitely recommend at least checking out the demo. I have a couple of other video ideas I may do in the future, plus I am definitely interested in checking out any major updates to the game as well. I hope you all enjoyed watching. Have a good one, everyone.